everybody. Just wanted to take a second and thank you for your support so far. Philly Legends podcast is doing great. We got a long way to go. We have a lot of great shows coming up for you. And I really appreciate if you would like, share, and subscribe to the channel on YouTube. Let's jump right into today's legend, Tommy McCarthy from WOGL. Everybody seems like they have gone through WCAM.
WCAM, when I was a kid, that not only that was the second radio station High Lit was hired on. First radio station where Jerry Blavitt worked at, that's where their quote unquote feud began, was at
Right.
WCAM, because when Jerry was there first, High came from HAT and they gave him an hour of Jerry's time. Well, that's where the feud began. That's where it started. So it began back. But anyhow, so listening to those guys, High had already been on Wibbage when I started listening, because we lived in Cape May until 62. 62, we moved up to Cherry Hill, and that's when I started listening to Blavitt and High on Wibbage, and Blavitt was on CAM.
So you're originally from Cape May?
No, originally I'm from up here. What happened was I was born in Cooper Hospital. We lived in Collingswood.
Okay.
My father was offered a job to run the Cape May Marina in Cape May. If you're familiar with Cape May, that just before you go over the little bridge into town, that a marina to the left.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
I think it's called South Jersey now. It was called the Cape May Marina.
Mm-hmm.
So he was hired. Friends of his bought that place. They were a machinist, and during World War II, they made bullets for the Army, and they made millions. So after the Second World War, they were looking for ways to invest their money, but they didn't want to work. They just wanted to invest money and then make money back from it. So they were friends with my father, and they bought the marina and offered him the job as dockmaster. That's the general manager. Dockmaster is the title. So we were down there for 7 years, and then we moved back up to Cherry Hill in 62. And that's when I started listening to High on Wibbage, Jerry on CAM. So that was like, so when I got hired at CAM, this is like, I made it already. My career is done. I don't have to go anywhere else. I worked here. Jerry worked here, all that. Pat Delsey. I don't know if you knew Pat Delsey.
I do.
Guy. So, and he was the general manager. He's the one that hired me. So anyhow, so I worked there from 76. That wasn't my first job. That was like my third job. My first job was down in Millville. Then I was in Mount Holly had a station at the time, and then CAM. And then in 80, I went down to WMID in Atlantic City, and I did it. I did afternoon drive there, and then on the weekends, Sunday night from 6 to midnight on the FM, which was WGRF, was the FM, 99 on the FM dial. The station's still there, different call letters. But it was owned by Merv Griffin at the time. That's where the GRF comes from on the FM side. They've changed the call letters over the years, but it was WGRF for Griffin. He didn't hire me, but he owned it at the time. So that was like, wow, that's cool. So that was from 80 to 82, and that's when I started working with Blavitt at Memories. Blavitt had heard me on the air. He knew me from going to his record hops over the day, like, hey, where you been, blah, blah, blah. And he said, first thing he says to me, can you promote your gigs on the air? And I said, yeah. He says, how'd you like to do a night at Memories? It was like that. So he gave me this was in the summer. He gave me a Thursday night, and then I started spinning for him on Friday and Saturdays.
Right.
So that's how that connection began. And then
how did the radio, what made you early on say, you know what, I want to be a DJ?
Well, records, music. Music was my escape. Whenever I was having a bad day at school, or my father was mad at me and wanted to beat me with a belt, something like that, my refuge was my bedroom and my music.
Wow.
That was my refuge. And then from here's another connection to the Cape May. When my father ran that marina, Sally Starr bought a boat, and it was called the Frivolous Sal. And she kept it at the marina. Right. So we knew Sally Starr. So my 14th birthday was coming up. And for my 14th birthday, my parents said, well, what do you want for your birthday? I said, I'd love to go to Bandstand. And now we're down in Cape May. Bandstand's at 46th and Market. I said, I'd love to go to Bandstand for my 14th birthday. But we know that all these kids, you go up, you take your chance. If you're not on the committee, the kids you saw all the time, like Arlene and Kenny and Justine and Bob and all those people you saw every day, they were called the committee. They were let in. They were the stars of the show. But everybody else just got in line. So we weren't going to drive up from Cape May and take a chance of getting in line because the studio only held like 150 kids on a good day. After that, they cut the line off. They say you have to come back
Right.
tomorrow. So I said to my mother, well, why don't you call Sally and ask Sally what she could, because Sally had her TV, Popeye Theater was in the
Sure.
Channel 6 building with Dick
Yeah.
Clark. So my mom, we had the number because we were friendly with her because my father was the dock master at the marina. He had all her information. Plus, she was at our house once or twice for dinner with her husband, Mark, at the time. And so we call Sally Starr up and say, Sally, Tommy, for his 14th birthday, would love to go to Bandstand. Is there anything you can do? She said, oh, sure. I'll get him passes. How many does he want? I said, well, he probably would like to bring a friend or two from school with him. She says, four. So she sends me the passes. I go up on my 14th birthday, get in Bandstand. I got to meet Dick Clark for the first time. I still
That's
have the
awesome.
autographed picture. We didn't have a camera. You know, in those days, nobody had cell phones. You had to
Absolutely.
bring
Nobody's
a
carrying
camera.
anything.
You know, we had to bring a camera. So I don't have a camera picture of that. Of course, through the years later on, I did because I worked at his bandstand grill and all that stuff. So I became very friendly with him later. But in those days, so anyhow, I go up there, went to Bandstand, got to dance on Bandstand for my 14th birthday. So through Sally Starr. So
That's
that
awesome.
was, so you know, it's funny how some of the cards, how they or dominoes fall in your life. They
Absolutely.
either help you or hurt you. You never know how those dominoes are going to fall. Let's put
That's
it
right.
that way, you know. But so back to your initial question, it was the music, the records. You know, I still bought baseball cards like other kids. You know, you buy the gum and had the baseball
Sure.
cards wrapped up in them back in our day. You know, I still did that kind of stuff that kids do, but to me, the passion was records. I started buying records at 9 years old with my little couple $1
Yep.
allowance.
I was 8 years old.
Whatever was out. Yeah, I was 9 when I bought
Yeah.
started buying records and the whole thing, and all through high school and all that. So when we moved up here in '62, and I started going to the record hops, and I saw all these kids come in, and Jerry's driving a Riviera, and High Lit's got a Cadillac. I'm saying, wait a minute. I'm in my bedroom. I could do this. Wait a minute. This is great. Just play records and you got a Cadillac or whatever.
It's amazing how High Lit and Jerry Blavitt have really and Butter and Harvey,
Yeah.
really, but they're from High Lit as well. I mean,
Oh,
Butter
yeah.
and Harvey are from High Lit, but
Right.
how they affected the next generation of DJs.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, Butter initially was a bouncer at High Lit's
Right.
record hops. He told me, I told me sometimes he really had to watch Butter because Butter enjoyed having a
Oh yeah,
confrontation.
High
So,
Lit
but
actually told me that story. High
Oh, he
Lit
did?
told me about, because I had asked him. It was at the Woodbine in Pennsauken. I had asked him about Butter. I said, I heard Butter got his start. He was like, yeah. He goes, I gave him a job because he would always be fighting.
Yeah,
And
right.
I figured giving him a job would stop
That's
the
exactly
fights
the
in
story.
the parties that I was having.
Right. He would come to, and he was the bouncer that stood alongside the stage at all the record hops, you know. And so that's the first time I saw him. I didn't really meet him or know him then, but that was
Right.
him. And then later, Harvey as well. Harvey would bring the records into the record hops and stuff like that. Harvey
Yeah.
first, when High had a dance show on the back of a flatbed truck during the summer at Channel 10 called the I think it was called the Highlight Dance Party. I forget the name of the show. That was before we moved up here, so I never saw it, but I've seen some clips of it through the years.
Right.
And so he would bring the artists on, like Fabian was on the show at the time.
Sure.
This was in the very late 50s, but Harvey was working for High in those days. That's how he started. And then,
Yeah.
of course, when he got to DAS, he brought those guys along. You know,
Yeah.
that's kind of what opened the door there. Yeah, exactly. So everybody is influenced by somebody, you know.
Yeah.
Luckily, if they take a liking to you, you're in good shape. If they don't, well, then you're still going to make it on your own in another way. But I was very, very fortunate that people like, working with Jerry, but High Lit was my mentor. High Lit was the guy. that helped get me into WOGL from our days working at WPGR and WSNI together. Hy really, really liked me he was like a big brother to me, and
Nice.
Harvey and I went back too with our association. But when you think of like this, a little bit inside baseball, the record promotion men, I'm sure you've met many of them over the years, getting your promotional copies to do. Well, there was a guy, a legendary guy here in Philadelphia called Matty, the Humdinger Singer. I don't know if you ever met Matty.
I haven't met him, but I've heard of him.
Well, he had a personality as big as a barn. He was a wonderful man, and he was a promotion man, and independent. He worked for ABC Paramount. Like he's the one who broke the Jim Croce records earlier on. Paul Anka. He's the one that got Paul Anka played on the radio here back in the late 50s. But then he was big with Jim Croce. So, and other artists too, because he worked for ABC Paramount. But then later he became an independent record promoter.
Okay.
And so he would give me all whatever I needed to do my nightclubs, all those 12-inch disco singles we used to get to play in the clubs. Luckily, I didn't have to put it out of my pocket. He would give me promotional copies and stuff like that. So when WOGL went from hot hits to oldies, WCAU FM went to WOGL, and Scott Walker, the program director, was looking for talent, but he wanted people that really knew the music. Matty Singer and Hy Lit were the two guys who said to Scott Walker, Tommy McCarthy's the guy you got to hire for this particular position you're looking for. And once I get in, he recognized my knowledge of the music, that he made me the music director. I was the music director for 26 years with CBS Radio. So that was great. And then, so that's kind of how I got in the door with WOGL, CBS, which owned it at the time, CBS Radio. So that was a pretty big deal. And especially working in the Channel 10 building. With so much, not only radio through the years with 1210 on the AM and 98.1 on the FM, but you had Channel 10 TV. And as we were growing up in the Delaware Valley, watching all those like kiddie shows from there. So shows like Action in the Afternoon, which was a Western show. They used to shoot in the backyard, which became a parking lot later on. But in those days, it was just a back lot. And they put a Western scene up. Right, of the saloon and the sheriff's office and all that, and they had gunfights out there and all that stuff. This was live days on Channel 10. I mean, this stuff was like, and then to be working in there when I got my first job, I used to walk down the halls for like the first 4 months, just touching the walls, trying to get the vibes from everything that had gone on there. Ed McMahon got his start in that building, as far as going national, and John Facenda. I mean, they even named the street John Facenda Boulevard because John Facenda was the premier newscaster in the 50s.
The voice. He was the voice of NFL films.
Of NFL films, right? You'll still hear his voice on some of those old clips, But he was, so to have been hired and worked in a building like that alone was like, wow, this is like more than I expected in my life. At the time, I told you, when I got to CAM in Camden, I thought I had made it. I had no idea that someday I'd be in Philadelphia working in the Channel 10 building.
So after spending all that time, 26 years as the music director,
right,
and then getting the awards, the Broadcast Pioneer Award and the Alliance Walk of Fame,
right. And
what
I
did
also
that all
got
mean to you?
the Legends of Vinyl Award too, which I think you got as well. Right,
we got that at the same time.
Right. The Legends of Vinyl. So
that's right.
We've been there, done that. We crossed everything off.
Yeah. In fact, if you look behind me, you could just see a little piece of the. Now it's moving over there. You see the Legends of Vinyl Award right there.
Yeah. It's like, we were just so fortunate in everything that we did. We followed our dream. It was like a little boy who wanted to be a policeman, wanted to be a fireman. I wanted to play music. I didn't think so much in the beginning of wanting to be a disc jockey until I went to those record hops and saw, wow, look at the excitement of all these kids dancing to these records that I play in my bedroom. I practice in my bedroom.
What was your favorite group?
Well, I had so many groups. I love the Four Top, Levi and the Four Tops. And those are some of the things I was so fortunate to host shows with. The Drifters, Charlie Thomas and the Drifters.
Right.
I don't know if you were there that night at the Woodbine Inn. This will take you back. when David Ruffin, not long before he passed, and Eddie Kendricks performed together at the Woodbine Inn. I hosted that show.
Well, you know, it's funny. I didn't see them there, but they had stopped over and seen Butter in Philly.
Okay.
That was the last time. Yeah. And David died not that far
long
after that.
Right here in Philadelphia, he died.
So I got a chance that was at the Phoenix.
Okay.
And I used to do Saturday nights and Butter did Sunday nights.
Okay.
And they had come in to pay homage to Butter. And I happened to be there. So, Butter said, "Hey, Joe, you want to meet David?" Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Of course I want to meet David Ruffin.
Exciting. And that was the last time they performed together. And they did like all their Temptation stuff that they each sang lead on.
Yeah.
Let me tell you a story. So when we're backstage, when I went in and introduced myself, I said, "I'm Tommy McCarthy. I'm going to be the MC tonight. I have just one question of you, David." I said, "There's a song that we play here in Philadelphia that wasn't one of your hits.
Statue of a Fool."
It's an album cut, and I don't know if you're going to play it, but if you do, the place will go crazy. He said, "What could that be?" I said, "A Statue of a Fool."
I was right.
He says, "What else could it be?" Right? Knowing the music like you know. Because he said, like Statue of a Fool, they want to hear My Girl and Since You,
right.
all that stuff. I said, is there a way you can play that? He says, "I wasn't actually planning on it." He says, "But the band knows the arrangement for it if I choose to play it. Let me think about it." So he didn't tell me, "Yes, I'm going to do it." So I didn't know he was going to do it. So I go on stage as I'm bringing David Ruffin and Eddie Kendricks, the original lead singers of the Temptations, ladies and gentlemen, place crowd. So they're doing some of their hits and stuff like that. So there's a part I'm sitting just to the left of the stage at the front table there, and not halfway through, but somewhere through the show, the lights go down, total black stage. And the next thing you know, there's a pin spot comes down on David, and he's doing, that pose of the thinker.
Oh, yeah.
You know that statue?
I know exactly what you're talking about. Okay.
So he does. Now, for the listeners out there who don't know that, it's tough to convey what I'm going to say with this. But he's on stage, and he has one foot up on a stool, and he's got his hands like this. It's called the thinker. If you ever want to
Rodin.
Go on Google and look at that. It's a statue.
Yeah.
And probably one of the most famous statues of something like that. So that's the statue. So when he did that, I said, "Oh my God, he's going to do it." And he goes, "Somewhere there should be for all the world to see a statue of a fool made of stone." And the place got crazy. The place went crazy.
That is awesome.
That was one of the highlights of me hosting shows, because I did shows with Frankie Lyman's Teenagers. I did them with Dion, the Temptations, the Four Tops, Levi. Just love Levi. His voice,
incredible.
Everything that he did. I did a show at the Valley Forge Music Fair with Little Richard. Now that was really something to do, a show with Little Richard, because him, he was off the charts. That guy.
Oh yeah.
So this was 1990. This was 1992 at the Valley Forge Music Fair. Now that was a great venue.
I love the Valley Forge Music Fair.
I did a show
love
there with Little Anthony, Leslie Gore, the Ronettes. Was a separate show, but Little Richard, this was just his show, and Lou Christie. And so I'm backstage with Little Richard. Now, again, I'm so sad that this is prior to cell phones. I didn't have a camera with me, because I would have loved to have had a picture with Little Richard.
Absolutely.
Now, when he passed, they put me on the Channel 17. They did a great tribute to Little Richard, and luckily I came on to talk about Little Richard and that experience. But when he came on, he was just so flamboyant, and of course, he's one of the architects of rock and roll. People ask me, like, if there was
rock and roll.
A Mount Rushmore for rock and roll artists, who would be on it? And I said, well, it would have to be Elvis Presley, Buddy Holly, Little Richard, and Fats Domino. You would have to have those as on the Mount Rushmore of rock and roll artists.
That's a great foursome there.
They put it on, and Chuck Berry. I'm sorry, I can't leave out Chuck Berry. Mm-hmm. So those are the artists to me that, they lit the spark of the whole thing. The whole thing came around because of their guitar work, the lyrics, and like Buddy Holly, who, of course, as you know, the Crickets were the inspiration for the Beatles. Same
Yep.
thing. John Lennon and Paul McCartney liked
Exactly.
the way Buddy Holly wrote music. Before that, everybody, Elvis, whatever, they would sing other people's songs,
Exactly.
not other people's songs so much. They'd have other people write songs for them. Like Elvis didn't do a lot of covers. He did some in the early days, but Jailhouse Rock was his song, and Love Me Tender, and blah, 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 go on and on. All Shook Up. But most artists, if you had a great voice, you relied on other composers to write the music for
That's right.
you. Buddy Holly was one of the first early rock and rollers who wrote his own music. And that
Yes.
was one of the inspirations. The Beatles thought that too, because they were doing American covers in their early days in
That's right.
Liverpool and when they were in Hamburg, Germany. But they said, well, there's no long-term career with this. We have to branch out and write our own stuff.
That's right.
And he was really the inspiration. And that's how they changed their name from the Quarrymen to the Beatles in tribute to Buddy Holly's Crickets. And you know that story.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So the whole thing, it's kind of, it starts the ball rolling of how things began in the beginning. I call the spark that lit the flame, and then things just started rolling uphill that way and just snowballed into what rock and roll and rhythm and blues combined itself. And then, of course, the Motown sound later on.
Yeah.
It's just amazing. One more thing about not having a camera on an opportunity. One day, Smokey Robinson is in town. He's going to do a show at the Mann Music Center. Now, in those days, I'm on WPGR, which is the AM sister station of 104.5 WSNI, the FM station.
Right.
Now, this is the 80s, where FM is definitely the big deal compared to AM stations in general, other than our station. You had me there, Jerry Blabbett was there, High Lit was there. The station was on fire. So I didn't know, or I would have brought a camera to work that day to the radio station. So Smokey was scheduled to come in and do an interview on the FM to promote the appearance at the Mann Music Center. And as he's walking down the hall, you had to go by our studio at PGR. Now it's soundproof, but some of the music can bleed through and you'll hear it. Now, I don't know what song that I was playing at the time in particular that caught his ear. And he said to the receptionist who was leading him down the hall to SNI, he says, wait a minute, what's going on in there? She says, oh, that's the AM. Like, yeah, that's the FM. You're going on the FM. He says, but wait a minute, what is it? She says, well, Mr. Robinson, you have this appointment. We have to get you on the air. So he goes in and does his interview on the FM. On his way back out, he whatever I was playing, he pushes slides the door open, and I hear the creak of the door, and I turn around. Smokey Robinson. I like to drop to my knees. It was like, whoa, you're kidding me. So he comes in. He says, man, what are you playing? And I said, well, this is WPGR, Philly Gold Radio. We're playing the sounds of Philadelphia. He says, man, whatever I had on I wish I remembered the exact song. It doesn't matter. It was the hip stuff that he wasn't expecting to hear. Let's put it that way. So, and in those days, we were playing songs on cart. Now, for people
I remember carts
look like 8 tracks.
Exactly.
They like to shake through the old 8 track. If you're old enough to remember an 8 track.
Oh yeah, yeah. I have boxes of them.
Yeah. So the cart machines have one song on each one of them, and they're in a carousel rack that you can spin. So he's standing there, and I'm doing my show, and I'm like, my knees are getting weak. Smokey Robinson's in the studio, and he's spinning the thing, and he says, so he sees his song "Happy Landing."
Wow.
In a cart. And he goes, wait a minute. Happy Landing, the mirror. He says, man, I forgot I even recorded this record. He says, can you play this? I said, absolutely, Smokey. He says, yep. So we play. So the phones, so I mentioned Smokey Robinson's in the studio. Now, the phones were busy anyhow. But, and in a radio studio, the phones don't ring because you'd hear the ring on the.
Exactly. They flash.
But the lights are flashing.
Mm-hmm.
He says, can I take some calls? So he's taking calls. People are like flipping out there talking to Smokey Robinson on the
That's
phone.
incredible.
He stayed with me for like 45 minutes. We talked about all kinds of stuff, but he was amazed at the beat because I said, Smokey, in Philadelphia, there's a lot of you think Detroit, Philadelphia was bigger with Motown than Detroit, Michigan. Now that seems impossible.
Harvey said the same thing.
There were a few Motown records. There was, I think, like "Helpless" by Kim Weston's one that comes to mind.
Love
that
it.
They didn't even play in Detroit. From what
Would I Love You by Smokey.
Would I Love You? Another B-side. He was
Yes.
amazed. I said, Smokey, some of your B-sides, Motown B-sides in particular, Third Finger Left Hands, for
Yep.
instance, all that kind of stuff. Everything Is Good About You by the Supremes.
Great
Would I Love
song.
You by the
That's probably my favorite song by them.
Absolutely. I said, Smokey, the B-sides are just as popular, if not in some instances more popular than the A-sides here in Philadelphia. He was blown away. He
Yeah.
stayed for like 45 minutes. They came to like, Smoke, we got to go to another station. They were, they're taking around to other stations. He said, Smokey, we got to go. You got an appointment at whatever station. So, but I didn't have a camera. No cell phones in those days yet, and so that was like, that was the of all the people I met in my career, celebrity wise, he was the one I was actually weak in the knees, because this is Smokey Robinson standing next to me.
I have a similar story to
I are
that.
talking like
On
the
similar
same
story.
level.
He came to the radio station, and I remember, and I've told this story a couple times. I had told the receptionist, two groups, the Whispers and Smokey Robinson. If
Right.
either one of them come to the station, call me, because I didn't go until later.
Yeah.
And call me so I get there. So she
Right.
called me. I guess a couple months went by. She said, Smokey's coming today. I'm like, okay. I rush up to the radio station. He comes in. Everybody's talking to him and taking pictures. I stood in the back. I couldn't even move.
That's the way it is. Exactly.
I never went up, never said hi, never
Right.
shook his hand. I just stood there like Smokey Robinson, man.
Right. I mean, come on. He was the poet laureate of Motown. I mean, his lyrics, I always felt that he was on the same par lyrically as Lennon and McCartney, without a doubt. Same,
absolutely.
Same level with the lyrics, the songs he wrote for all the different art, the Temptations, Mary Wells, aside from the Miracles.
Yes.
Just an incredible, catalog of music that came out of his, What's So Good About Goodbye was one of my when I was in Atlantic City radio and WMID, I did a Sunday night show called the Treasure Chest of Oldies Show. And that was my closing theme, was What's So Good About Goodbye by Smokey's Miracles.
Right.
So I've always loved all their music. But it just flowed from him. It just came, and I always love hearing these stories about what inspired them. And in fact, one of his songs, I Second That Emotion. He said he was out clothes shopping one day with, I think Harvey Fuqua, somebody like that. And he says, well, what do you think about this suit? Like they're trying on clothes in a clothes. And Harvey says something like, he says, do you like this? He says, yeah, I like that. He says, yeah, he says, and Smokey says, yeah, I second that notion. Wait a minute. I second that. How about I second that emotion? Yeah, that sounds like a title.
It's great how they come up with that stuff.
He was trying on clothes, and just the title, he didn't have any lyrics. The title of I Second That Emotion came from buying a suit. And that's how things, you heard the story about Paul McCartney, who woke up and he started thinking of scrambled eggs in the morning and wrote Yesterday. So there's all these kind of stories that, that spark somebody to do something like that. So you and I, Joe, have been so fortunate into, number one, we grew up and had our careers during the last heydays of what great radio was. Radio today, correct. Terrestrial radio I'm talking about, is nothing. We used to have 7 live jocks on the air around the clock 24/7. Now it's all voice tracked from other parts of the country. There's one live person on my former radio station in the morning. There's no personality. There's nobody out doing appearances. It's like all gone. Still got to share and work with the people who inspired us, like you with Butterball or Jimmy Bishop or anybody, Carl Helm, all these people that were very important to us.
Yeah.
Me with Jerry Blavitt, with High Lit, with Don Cannon. We got to work with them, know them, be friends with them.
Yeah.
We were so fortunate that the people today, I don't know why anybody would even want to be in radio today, because it's nothing like it was.
I don't see the attraction to it.
No, because it's all, first of all, it's all computerized. You remember, like we talked about the records, schlepping around those 12-inch disc carts of records up and down steps to get in there, do those mixes, get that dance floor going. Today, it's all in the computer. Let me say, well, I already got my mixes. They're all pre-mixed. There's people still on the radio who go in and they do it's already pre-mixed, because I know you're associated with people like that.
Oh, absolutely.
Where the feeling for the room, for the night,
Yeah.
for the
It's all
crowd,
over.
every crowd's different. You could give, in those days when you and I were jocking every night, you could give two disc jockeys, say, the same 20 songs. One guy would have, with those same 20 songs, would have the dance floor moving, and the other guy, it's like here and there, because
Yep.
he didn't get the mix right. He started too hot to begin with. He didn't build up. It's all didn't know when to bring them down.
It was all taken for granted.
All that stuff. Now it's in
Yeah.
your computer. Just push a button and you can have, drink a beer or whatever, and it's already done for you.
Yeah, it's a
So
shame.
So it is a shame, and there's no relation to it. When I was a kid, I'm a little bit older than you. When you got in the car, the first thing, hey mom, put on Wibbage, put on DAS,
I
whatever.
was the same way.
Now they don't even care about a radio because it's all on their phones. So
Right.
they've got their playlist already, or they're playing games or whatever.
It's
There's not
insane.
that passion. We back in the day, and it still happens today probably. We're driving along and we're getting to our destination, but there's a song on the radio that we love. We sit there, and I don't care if it's another 3 minutes to go. You're not going to get out of the car until that song's over. We still have that passion. Even though you've heard that song 100 times, it's still, oh my God, I love hearing this song every time they play it.
Absolutely.
So that feeling that we had and the things that drew us into this business that we love, began at a very young age, and we were lucky enough to pursue our dreams and not give up the dream, because
That's
there's
right.
a lot of pitfalls along the way. There's a lot of people don't want to give you a break, or for whatever reason, they decide to bring somebody else in to make changes here and there. I was fortunate, you were fortunate to stay in this market for our whole careers. I stayed
Exactly.
26 years working for CBS Radio. I mean, it's kind of unheard of when you think about it alone.
It really
But
is.
45 years in radio, from 1975 until 2016 when I retired radio, but still do the stage shows. Still a
Right.
couple of times a year out in Pottstown, we do stage shows with the Duprees and the Drifters and the Golden Boys, and
I want to see Bobby Wilson.
Jackie,
Bobby Wilson.
Bobby Wilson. I just put up a video, if you saw it, day before yesterday on Facebook. Me and my wife Joan, we were backstage alone after I brought Bobby out to do his show. He one of the songs he sang was "Twisting the Night Away," and there's Joan and I backstage twisting, and there's Bobby. You can see through the middle of us out there doing the twist too. So it's I put it up, I think, like 2 days ago. I put that.
I'd like to get in contact with him.
Oh, I can arrange that. Sure.
Awesome. Yeah, I'd love to have him on the show.
Oh, okay. We'll see.
I was I was probably his father's number one fan.
Yeah.
Jackie, I mean, I loved him. I loved Jackie Wilson.
And of course, his last appearance was here in Cherry Hill at the old Latin Casino.
I went to the hospital and seen him after he had. My mother was a nurse at Cherry Hill Hospital.
Oh, okay.
I went to the hospital and she got me into the intensive care to walk by his room.
Well, how about that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Yeah. And then he wound up in a nursing home for years in Medford.
That's correct.
Before he passed.
Yeah.
But yeah, what a talent he was. But yeah, he had that stroke right there on the stage of the Latin Casino here in Cherry Hill.
I heard, now I don't know if this is a rumor or not, but and we didn't talk about your connection with Dick Clark, but I heard that Dick Clark and Elvis Presley paid for his hospitals for years and years after.
I've heard that same story. Now, of course, Dick never mentioned that. He didn't want to bring that stuff forward. I have heard that exact same story. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, the Dick Clark thing with he and I was fortunate in, number one, working for a major radio station, WOGL, and we carried his syndicated show, Rock, Roll, and Remember, on Saturday mornings. So when he would come to Philadelphia, for whatever reason, he would always stop into the station, and I got to meet him that way and reminded him about that first time I told you that as a 14-year-old, I went to Bandstand and got to meet him with Sally Starr and all that. So he got a kick out of that station. So we became friendly, and then I got the job. He had the nightclub called Dick Clark's American Bandstand Grill in King of Prussia, right outside the mall.
I remember it.
And I was hired there. I was the DJ on weekends there for the last 2 years it was open. And I did the last 2 years Rockin' Eves from there. And it was so cool because we had Dick Clark, because he was still well. This was long before his stroke.
Right.
Up on the big screen in the club while I was playing music in the club for New Year's Eve. The sound was muted, but we saw him up in
Sure.
Times Square. And so here it is, New Year's Eve, the last 2 New Year's Eves it was open. I'm spinning music for Dick Clark on New Year's Eve while he's in his nightclub, while he's up on the big screen with the Rockin' Eve. So that was really, really
that's incredible.
Pretty incredible.
Yeah.
You know? And then when he passed, the local outlets, I was on 3, 6, 10, 17, 29. They all came to me and interviewed me because of my friendship with him. Because oddly enough, 2 weeks prior to his stroke, I was in LA at his offices in Burbank. He invited me out for the American Music Awards.
Wow.
I went out there that weekend, and I spent the weekend in his offices. He showed me around all of his memorabilia. Now that I have pictures from, occasionally I'll put them up on Facebook. Those, luckily, later on, when cell phones came around, I got pictures with Dick Clark when I was older in my career. So out there for that. And then I come back to the station, and it's like 2 weeks later, and people in this was when we were still in the Channel 10 building. So the news crew and I was friends with people there, Steve Levy and people like that.
Right.
They knew I had just come back, just casually. And then all of a sudden the news breaks so I'm in my office upstairs, and all of a sudden one of the news people comes in, and there's a guy with the big camera on his arm behind him, and he's going, "Tommy, did you hear the news?" And I go, what happened? What could it possibly be? Dick Clark just had a stroke, and we knew you were just out there visiting him. Can you do an interview? So I did, and then when that went out, then Channel 6 came over and all the other channels. So I was like all over. I even, there was a clip on, I think Entertainment Tonight or Access Hollywood, that had a clip of me next to Chubby Checker talking about him. So that was all pretty cool. So so I had a pretty exciting career of even latching on to Dick Clark, even though he was out in L.A.
You got to see so much, Tommy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, you crammed a lot of history in here real quick.
Yeah. Yeah, well, when you get my age, you got to get it in while you can. Because every day.
No, it's awesome. Because everything that I can relate. I can relate to everything that you're saying.
For sure. And you were here through all of that.
And it was just phenomenal.
Yeah.
And it helped me relive a few things that I forgot about. So
right. Yeah.
It's this business, and you're absolutely right. We came up at a time where it was still radio.
Right.
It's not radio. By the time I got to the end of my career, it wasn't radio.
No.
And I was like, bye.
Yeah. Well, that's why when it was time for me to retire, I was ready, because I had lived through the best of times. There was nothing going forward that was going to be half as exciting of what I had gone through coming up through those 45 years in radio from my early days, and doing the nightclubs, doing the stage shows. And another thing was I worked for QVC for 14 years selling music product. And that was a fluke too. What happened was,
that's awesome.
Birthday, I worked there from 2000 to January of 2014 on QVC. I was on multiple times through the.
You were selling the record collections, right?
I sold all the box sets. I did everything from doo-wop to Sinatra to Rod Stewart. I did Celine Dion. All of them. I was, quote unquote, their music authority for 14 years when CDs were still viable. Why I'm no longer doing it, and why it ended then, because by 2014, even though you can still buy a CD today, the CDs had dropped out. People were just downloading stuff on their phones. They didn't have to buy CDs anymore in that quantity, because when you're on QVC and somebody can go in and sell a gold chain and do twice the money that you can do CDs, you're not going to be there long. So my 14 years were during the heyday when people were replacing their vinyl record collections, in particular, looking for these box sets and all that. Plus, I sold memorabilia. I saw when Michael Jackson passed, I was on selling record plaques, gold record plaques, his DVDs from that last concert he was putting together. That Susan Boyle when she came out. If you remember
Yeah.
Susan Boyle, the one who
Yeah.
won on that contest
American
over in
Idol or
England,
something. Yeah, the one in
I can't
England.
even remember it, but we sold 4 million copies of that CD in
Wow.
like 2 showings. It was like on fire. They gave me I can't bring it out now and show you, but I have a platinum plaque, a 4 CD platinum plaque that Sony Records gave me that hangs on my wall over here in my music room, commemorating $4 million worth of sales on QVC. So I had a great run with that. And that was really a fluke. I'll just show you how that things can happen in life.
Yeah.
So it's August of 2000. The Elvis celebration, QVC wanted to do an Elvis presentation for the commemoration of him passing in August. This was 2000. So naturally, we're an oldie station in Philadelphia, and they're in Westchester, QVC. So one of the production people called the station and said, we want to we're going to do an Elvis celebration on his birthday in August. Is there somebody there who you could send over who could help us, our regular host, present these Elvis CDs we have? So the promotion director comes to me, her name's Cindy Webster, and says, Tommy, I talked to Scott Walker, our program director, and we both thought you would be the perfect person to go to QVC to represent the radio station. This was going to be a one-shot thing.
Right.
To represent the radio station and to sell these Elvis products for the one day. So I'm thinking, wow, I don't know, national TV. I don't know if I'm ready for that yet. So I go over. This is August of 2000. It's Elvis' birthday celebration, and I'm selling the music along with the host. You're always on with the host. You're the presenter with the host that works there. And it was phenomenal. They sold out. It was really good. So I come home. I'm all happy. Wow, that was great, because I was worried about that, I set my little VCR up and I got a tape of it and all that. So then I don't know how much longer it was. They called back and Cindy comes in my office. Hey, say, Tommy, somebody from Capitol Records called and they want to know if you can sell their products. They saw you do the Elvis presentation. I said, what? So it sprang from that, where, you never say never. Here's another point I'm trying to make in this whole thing is never turn down an opportunity.
Yeah.
It can be good, it can be bad, but you never know. Because had I said, oh, I'm afraid I can't go on the national television, somebody else would have got the gig.
Absolutely.
And who knows how it would have turned out. So by me taking that first shot, thinking it was a one-time thing, and then it snowballed, and then I was selling for Sony, I was selling for WIA, every major label, and then they even had me selling like the plaques, like gold records and memorabilia.
It's a great story.
Beatles, I did the Beatles, the red and the blue Beatles box sets.
Yeah.
I did. Yeah, so I'm doing all this kind of stuff, and they were calling me Tommy McCarthy from CBS Radio, QVC's music authority for 14 years. So it was real, and that was just a fluke. I thought
that's incredible. But that's the way that stuff happens.
Right. So you never know. Never say never.
Yep,
and never
you take on an opportunity.
Never turn down an opportunity, because you never know how it can turn into another opportunity you were totally not expecting. You never know.
Incredible stuff, Tom.
Yeah.
Incredible. And an incredible career. I mean,
yeah, thank you.
That's
I just grinded it out. I never thought of it. Looking back, I have some perspective of it. But, in our business, you never knew where the next paycheck was going to come from sometimes. So, in a radio, if you didn't have ratings, you were out the door.
Absolutely.
So when I got hired the first time at any station, I thought if I get 6 months or a year, I'll be good and I'll go to another station. I never thought that I would spend my whole 40 some years in the Philadelphia market. Like some people didn't. A lot of people, they traveled around.
Sure.
People like, you think about some of the big names like Dr. Don Rose, King George Michael, these major jocks that were on Jim Nettleton. They were on WFIL, the biggest station in the country.
Boss jocks.
But they all bounced around to different cities. None of them stayed more than 4 or 5 years in any particular market. So you were living like a gypsy. You and I got to stay in basically our hometown for our whole lives and still grind out a great career. And that's why we were very fortunate in being able to do it that way. That I didn't have to move to California or Chicago or Alabama or wherever to keep making money. I was able to, grind it out here. And of course, beside radio, we did nightclubs, did stage shows. I did weddings, bar mitzvahs, you name it. You want me to show up with a microphone?
Yep.
I'm
Did
there.
the same thing.
I'm there.
I did the whole gambit.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, that's why you're still around doing what you do.
Yep.
Absolutely. That's why
And
you
this is
drive a
fun.
Mercedes Benz.
Yep. Driving a convertible Mercedes, and it's a beautiful
That's
thing.
Exactly. Exactly.
There's an article talks about you're driving a Corvette convertible.
Yeah, that was one of our car shows. Yeah, well, over the years I've had various cars. I've had two.
Well, you're
Corvettes.
a car guy.
Yeah, I'm definitely a car guy. That was at one of our WOGL car shows. Where,
Okay.
I had an '88 Chevy Corvette convertible at the time.
Yep.
'88, red with red interior and a white rag top.
Nice.
I had that. Prior to that, I had an '80 T-top Corvette. So I had two Corvettes over those years. But I had motorcycles. I had a boat. I was always out doing.
You still have the boat?
No, I let the boat go.
The
boat go. It got to be too expensive and
that's a lot of money.
Yeah, but always loved to convert. Always had a convertible of some sort.
I had
like
an
80. I had motorcycles. Always had to be out in the fresh air.
I had an '83 Riv convertible.
Okay.
Very rare car. Only like 500 made.
Right.
I redid it.
Yep. I had the same car, only 81, but a hardtop. I had the 81, same body style. I'm saying.
Memory seats.
Yeah.
It had everything. This car was way ahead of its time. Front four-wheel disc brakes, front-wheel drive. Yeah. It was an incredible car. I had it for I probably had it for 10, 12 years before I sold it. But I redid the car back to showroom.
Right.
It was beautiful.
Right.
Love that car.
They were beautiful. Those seats, did you have the velour interior? Oh, no, yours was our convertible. You had the leather then. I had
leather.
I had the velour.
Oh, I know the velour one because I had another one that had velour, but mine I actually customized it. I did it burgundy and white, so it had a white inlay and burgundy on the outside. Nice. It was gorgeous.
Nice,
gorgeous,
very nice.
Won so many awards with that car.
Yeah.
How many Mercedes did you owned?
5.
5. I've had 2. I've only had 2.
I've had 5. I
had the SLK 350 prior to this with the retractable top.
Yes.
And then I bought this one. I absolutely love that car, the E350.
Right.
You're an S-Class guy.
Yes. No. Well, I had my first
Tommy,
one.
I'm not there yet. I'm still at the E-Class.
Oh, you are? Well, that's not a bad place to be. Yeah, I had an SL 500.
Yeah, nice. I seen it.
A hardtop convertible.
Yep, beautiful vehicle.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. Yeah.
Man, they're fast, too.
Yeah, they move. And they're a big, sturdy car.
Absolutely. Yeah, they're so underrated, those cars.
Oh, yeah.
I love them.
Especially with the hardtop convertible. That's really great because, and the lines are beautiful either way, whether top down or with the top up. Because some cars look better with the top, convertibles in particular, look better with just the top down in some instances.
But my Riviera was one of them.
The lines are good. Yeah. The lines are good.
And the same with that. I love that E-Class body style.
Oh, yeah. It's a class.
It's just, and it is lightning fast.
Oh, yeah. They pick up. They really get and go. That's for sure. Nothing like cruising.
But that was the SL is the 8-cylinder.
Yeah, right. 8-cylinder. Yeah.
That's a monster.
Yeah.
In that little car.
Yeah, big car. But real comfortable and really sturdy on the road.
Yeah.
Real sturdy.
Absolutely. Beautiful vehicles.
Exactly. Yeah.
You got anything else you want to add?
Well, I want to ask you a question because I don't know if you've ever talked about this in your career with your viewers.
Sure.
We all know that Joe Tamburo Butterball from Philadelphia, a legendary, beautiful man, lovely man.
Absolutely.
One of the friendliest, easiest people to talk about. In our business, there's a lot of egos. Some people will talk friendly to you at your face, and then you find out somebody heard something on the side. You never hear that with Butterball.
No.
Joe Tamburo. My question to you is, and to your listeners, unless you've told them before, is how did you come about your friendship and get to know and work with him? How did you get your foot in the door with Butterball?
It was really funny because I had been on Power 99 for many years
Right.
and was doing a live show with them for 17 years.
Uh-huh.
And I started getting into playing the oldies because that was my true love.
Right. Right.
What I did in my DJ career wasn't really what I started out to do. That I got sidetracked that way with Frank Cerami.
Oh, okay.
But what happened was I had this idea. To do an oldies night, and I called Butter, and I said, Butter, I'm thinking about putting together this oldies night on Thursday nights in New Jersey, and I was wondering if you'd be interested in doing it with me. And if I, of course, you got to get paid what you want to get paid and all that
right.
good stuff. And I said, I can set up a meeting where you can come over and meet the owner. And he said to me, yeah, let's try it. And he came over, and he met with the owner. They came into an agreement. I wasn't involved in that. I just said, that's up to you. That's your gig. I got my own gig.
Right.
And we'll just work together.
Uh-huh.
And that wound up working. We were there for 4 years. And then we left there. We went to Philly and did it for another 3.5 years.
Wow.
And then he started getting sick.
Yeah.
But and I had no idea that he would even say, I had met him a couple times prior to that.
Yeah.
But, and I felt that I had a decent relationship with him.
Yeah.
And I just said, you know what? I'm going to call him. I got his number. I got a cell number from someone. And I called him up and I was like, it's Joe Callari. Hey, Joe, how you doing?
Yeah.
Great. I got a question for you. I don't know if you'd be interested or, just blow me off or whatever you want to do, because you're the king.
Yeah, without a doubt.
And luck would have it. And then, standing in the booth with him for all those years, it was just incredible.
Right. Oh yeah.
Because you got to hear the stories.
Yeah.
And man, did he have the stories.
He did have the stories.
He was phenomenal.
Well, he was there, especially, from the early 60s when all this music that we love. Okay, there was the 50s music, but the early times with the Stax music and of course the Motown music.
Absolutely.
And the Atlantic, all the stuff that came on the Atlantic record label, all that R&B music. He was there when all these major artists that are legendary today first started out, and he got to meet and befriend all those people when they were coming out, like with their first record, and didn't know how their career was going to go, good or bad. And he got to know everybody, and everybody knew him, and everybody loved him. You just say his name, Butterball from Philadelphia. It's like him and Georgie Woods were like, whoa. You guys, and Georgie, I was lucky enough to work with him too for a short time.
Yeah, I met him a couple times, but I never got to work with him.
Yeah,
the greatest thing about, like you were saying about Butter, is we started doing these track dates. So I came up with the idea. Now I'm like, I need the connection to get in touch with these people. So I would call Butter and go, "Hey, Butter, you know anybody from Blue Magic?" He was like, "Yeah, I used to be their manager." And I would go, "Okay, do you know anybody?" "Yep." I make one phone call. He knew everybody, everybody. And that was such a great connection.
Yeah.
And like I said, he was just a fun guy to be around. And he was beloved by the people.
Oh yeah, without a doubt.
Man.
Yeah. I went to his funeral, as I know you were there.
Yeah, I was there.
That cathedral, and if you're not from Philadelphia, you're not familiar with the cathedral. It holds like 3,000 people, I think, something like that. And it was just about filled to the rafters.
Yep.
I mean, without a doubt, Philadelphia just, loved him because he was so legendary. From the first time he cracked his microphone, he was on AM, WDAS AM the first time I listened to it before he went to the FM. But he spent his entire career on one radio station. Think about it. He never had to leave DAS.
And he started in sales.
Oh, yeah, right.
All right.
Well, that's how I think I got him in that way.
Yeah.
I think I got him in that way. Exactly.
Yep. Yeah. And then parlayed everything into, he became the program director, the OM. Right. I mean, he did it all.
He did it all. Right. He
was just great.
What they were going to play. Yeah. Right.
And know the music.
Yeah.
It was like working with an encyclopedia.
Yeah.
I mean, I take pride into knowing a lot, but when you get to those guys who are like They were there before you were thought of.
Right, right. Well,
It's a
they had
great
it in
thing.
their blood. It's like I said, like guys like you and I, who in our early, not even our teens, in our 9, 10 years old,
That's right.
we're starting to absorb this music. And by the time we
Absolutely.
got into our 20s and tried to get into the career, we had a fountain of knowledge that
Absolutely.
not everybody had. And when you got to meet somebody like Butterball or High Lit, and you could impress them with, geez, he's like he's into it. He's like a
Yes.
seasoned pro already. This kid, we got to give him a shot. We got to see what he can do, because
Yeah.
he's not just wants to be on the radio because he wants to be on the radio, because he
And
wants his mom and
I
dad
think
to hear.
that's the common denominator, Tommy, is that knowledge that you knew going in.
Right,
When you finally met that High Lit or that Butter or whoever it was that helped you along,
right,
when they seen what you knew,
right.
and they were just like, wow,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah, like
this is no joke.
he's the next generation. See, that's
Yeah.
what it was. We were the second generation. The first generations were the Georgie Woods and the Butterballs and the Blavits and the High Lits and the Joe Niagaras.
Yeah.
That was the first generation. But then we the Harvey Holidays, you, me, we were the second generation coming in of the Philly guys who
Yes.
really knew not just Philadelphia, but the music, and we knew how to relate to the audience, to the people. Where the people embraced us, not so much as strong as maybe a Butterball, but they still accepted
Right.
us as this is the new generation that's going to carry the torch forward.
Yeah.
That's where we came in.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's exactly how it was.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. But
Unbelievable, Tommy. Great. I
it's
mean,
unbelievable. Well,
great talking with you,
yeah, you too, my friend.
because we never even talked about the New Year's Eve we did together, but that'll be
Oh yeah,
another
there we
show.
go. We were at the Toga Bar at Harrah's, right? Is
That's
that what
I
it
forgot
was?
the name of the bar. I knew it was
Yeah, the Toga Bar.
okay. That was Harris.
Yeah, I think it was Harrah's.
It
Yeah.
was okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah,
Was
I
it
did.
Harrah's or the
Yeah.
Golden Nugget? No. Yeah, that's a good. When you worked as many gigs as we have over the years, it kind of becomes a little bit of a blur.
It
I think
does.
I know the room was called the Toga Bar.
I
It
was
was
absolutely the Toga Bar.
right off the gambling
Yep.
floor.
Right there. You were right in the center. It was
We were
great.
right there, and
Yeah.
Golden Nugget. I don't know.
I don't remember either,
now
but it
I'm
was one of
questioning
those.
myself which casino it was, but it was the Toga Bar. That much
Yep.
I do remember.
It was one of those AC
Oh, wait a
gigs.
minute. No, it was Caesar's, because that's why it
Caesars.
was called the
It
Toga
was
Bar.
Caesars.
Because
Yep.
Caesar with the togas.
Yes.
Hey, my brain's still working at this age.
Yep. It was
That's what it
Caesars.
was. It was
Absolutely.
Caesar's in Atlantic City.
Because
That's
I
why they
did work
call
at
it
Harrah's.
Toga Bar, because it,
Right.
Caesar, the way
That's right. The
Emperor
toga.
Caesar would dress with a toga.
Yep.
Yeah, there you go.
Yep.
I figured it out before somebody called you in and told you that guy doesn't remember.
and you know that they would. That'll be the
Yeah,
first thing.
absolutely.
Toga's not in there. In there.
Yeah, the
Harrah's.
Toga Bar at Caesar's. We got it.
That's right. Yep. And that was fun. That was a
All
great night. And
Yeah.
a pleasure talking
Yeah.
with you, Tommy. I really
Yeah,
appreciate
my
your
pleasure.
time.
Thank you for thinking of me, Joe, because I know
Yep,
you know
absolutely.
everybody in the business. I'm glad to be just one of the people you would add to your list of all the many, many people that you're associated with and have befriended with and worked with in our business for all these many years.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. It's
my
been
pleasure.
so much fun.
Thank you, my friend.
And you're one of the legends.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, sometimes I
mean-
think that just means you're getting old. You know what I mean?
Well, here's the thing. You got to
Sometimes
be
I
old to
can't
be a
stay from
legend.
that title.
You never hear of a young legend.
That's right. That's right. You never do.
Right?
You'd be a prodigy,
I
but
mean-
not a legend.
Now you should be proud of your achievements. They're incredible.
Well, thank you. Well, I
Absolutely.
was lucky that I worked hard. I did my best. I tried to be a stand-up guy. In this business, sometimes you can't always go that route, but I tried to always be a stand-up guy. And luckily, I never offended anybody where they tried to block me or anything.
Right.
And the people like the High Lits or the Don Cannons who helped me along the way, Maddie Singer, as I mentioned, the Humdinger, people like that who took a liking to me, put their hand on my shoulder and said, "Come on, you're good.
Yeah.
We're going to help you up this ladder to success." Dick Clark, even
That's awesome.
working at his nightclub for 2 years, all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
I was fortunate that, and being at the right place at the right time has a lot to do with a lot of things. Like I told you, that
Sometimes
opportunity-
working really hard
Right.
you find yourself in the right place at the right time.
Exactly. You show up every day. You don't say, I'm too tired to do this, or
That's
I don't
right.
want to do that. You show up, you put your best foot forward, and good things could happen to you because you never know.
Absolutely.
Like I told you, that opportunity at QVC, I thought it was a one-time shot, and I worked there for 14 years. So
It's incredible.
yeah. So you never say never.
Absolutely.
That's my
Well, thank you again,
philosophy.
Tommy. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Joe Too Cool Callari.